Several years in the past, a proposal emerged in the Arizona legislature suggesting the allowance of office agency for real estate companies in the state. However, a significant condition was attached to it. Multi-office companies were required to appoint at least an associate broker to lead each office, with responsibilities delegated by the designated broker. This proposal faced opposition from many large multi-office companies, as it implied considerable expenses for hiring office brokers. Consequently, the bill never advanced to a vote. Currently, the prevailing practice dictates that agency authority originates from the broker, not the individual agent, regardless of the number of agents or offices operating under that broker. This structure inevitably leads to the possibility of dual agency when two agents under the same broker engage in a cross-sale, even if they work in different offices and have never met. While an agent can avoid dual agency by exclusively representing the seller when selling their own listing, the scenario changes when an agent, let's say Mary, employed by broker Steve, sells a listing belonging to another agent, Jim, who also works for broker Steve, resulting in dual agency every time. The larger the real estate firm, the higher the likelihood of encountering dual agency, emphasizing the importance of agents conducting thorough agency disclosures and obtaining prior consent to dual agency well in advance. Agents commonly face a dilemma when they fail to disclose agency information to a buyer, neglect to have them sign the necessary forms, and work with the buyer for an extended period. Whether acting as the buyer's agent or a dual agent, if the agent proceeds to write a contract without making an agency disclosure, issues arise when the broker requests the completion of the necessary paperwork, such as the read form. The agent may find themselves unprepared to go back to the buyer and secure the required signatures and contract modifications. Instead of disregarding the request, it is advisable for the agent to communicate with the broker to determine the best course of action. Different brokers may have varying approaches, such as requesting the agent to backtrack and have the client sign the form, possibly predating it to match the contract, or discussing the matter without insisting on revisiting the process. Ultimately, the broker must prioritize the integrity of the documents in the file, including the agency disclosure. A common question raised by agents pertains to the duration of their agency relationship with clients. Does it last indefinitely or conclude at a certain point? While there isn't clear-cut guidance on this matter, it is generally understood that the agency relationship persists as long as the agent has not completed the assigned task, whether it involves finding a house or selling a property. Conversely, if the agent successfully fulfills the client's request, it is assumed that the agency relationship comes to an end. If a potential buyer approaches you with the intention of purchasing a house, let's assume that you establish a valid buyer agency with them. After crafting and having the offer accepted, navigating through escrow, and successfully closing the deal, does your agency relationship with the buyer conclude? Yes, it does. Since you have completed the task of helping them acquire a home, the agency relationship terminates. Similarly, if you list a property, see it through to sale and closure, does your agency relationship with the seller come to an end? Once again, the answer is affirmative. Your agency relationship concludes upon successfully selling their property. Consider a scenario where a buyer initially intends to purchase a residence for personal use and subsequently plans to acquire additional properties for rental purposes. Does your agency relationship cease upon the closing of the first residence, or does it persist until all rental purchases are finalized? It ends once the buyer completes the acquisition of the rentals. Now, if a seller entrusts you with the sale of 5 of their listings, your agency relationship likely continues until the last property concludes escrow. Building on this, what if you list a property, successfully close the deal, and then assist the same client in purchasing another property to live in? When does the original agency relationship terminate? It concludes when the listing closes escrow, marking the end of your role as the seller's agent. Subsequently, a new relationship commences with the client as a buyer's agent. Consider a scenario where you have successfully sold a client's home and the agency relationship has officially ended. 5 months later, they contact you, expressing a desire to sell another property they own. Is a new agency disclosure required, Or can you utilize and review the previously signed disclosure from when they initially listed their house? This situation is not entirely clear. Since the READ form lacks property specificity, meaning there is no property address line, you could potentially use the form they previously signed and include it in the new file. However, your broker may prefer an updated READ form with the current date, operating on the assumption that the agency relationship ended when you closed their property 5 months ago. Consequently, you might need to revisit the agency agreement with them, obtaining their signature and date on a new READ form. When in doubt, draw up a new READ and explain it is the same form, just an updated date for the new transaction. What if a seller wants you to list their property and then help find and purchase another property? You would need a different READ form. The seller would elect to have you as the listing agent to sell the seller's property, and then use a new form to have the seller who is not the buyer-elect to have you represent them as the buyer's agent.